So good afternoon, everyone. I think they say that the best ideas happen just before lunch. So thank you for coming here. I know it's just the hunger kicking in. So we'll make it quickly. I speak fast when I'm hungry, so all good. So today I'm talking about securing manufacturing's transition to Google Cloud. And this is like a case study based on, in my role, I deal with a number of customers for Google Cloud who are in the manufacturing and industry vertical. And from my vantage point, from my interactions with the C-level and the CISOs, this is they put together like a high-level strategy around how to be successful, how to secure that transition. Just an introduction, as Daniel mentioned, I'm from the Google Cloud Office of the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officers, and I lead the manufacturing vertical. So we have a fairly interesting agenda. So we'll talk about how is the cyber threat landscape, and some of the challenges within the manufacturing industry. And then we will dive into many of you probably are already on the cloud or thinking about cloud or in that journey. We'll share some of the strategies that I have learned in my tenure at Google, and even prior to that. So starting from the first industrial revolution, and now with a quicker acceleration of adoption of Industry 4.0, and many companies are even moving past 4.0, and they're calling it 5.0 with the human-machine AI collaboration. One thing is constant, that the change is constantly evolving. It doesn't cease to stop, and it will continue to evolve and transform. So one thing that I want to make sure here is that the opportunity as we go into the Industry 5.0 is immense, but there are challenges from a security perspective that we see as well. So in the next few slides, in a few minutes, we'll cover what those are. So what does that evolving threat landscape look like? So currently in the manufacturing industry, the threat landscape is primarily driven from the convergence of OT and IT. I was with a customer last week, and he basically told me, oh, there is no such thing as OT anymore. OT is equal to IT. But where it is coming from is that the operational technology environment and some of the customers who are moving to cloud as well, there are a lot of proliferation of sensors in the OT environment. That means the traditional air-gapped security is no longer there. Most of the companies, at least who I work with on a day-to-day basis, they want to connect operational technology environment to cloud for analytics, for getting more of these AI use cases and for other reasons. So as the interconnection that is happening, what is challenging is you're dealing with a lot of legacy systems as well, which compounds the threat landscape. Some of these systems cannot be patched, or some of them are not patched for like years, and that's why many a times we hear that, oh, these are air-gapped, and that's why customers don't want to connect to cloud, right? So that's one of the challenge. The other one is the supply chain. For manufacturing these days, the way I see it as it's not just a manufacturing companies anymore. As we're talking about the industrial revolution, it is a software plus data plus AI company, along with the manufacturing processes. What that means is the interconnection of physical as well as the the virtual, the digital world. The supply chain is really, really complex, right? So many a times you are dependent on the third parties for providing these, even the firmware, softwares, and other parts. And if they are vulnerable, those vulnerabilities are passed on to the product, and ultimately they are passed on to the consumer. So that is one of the other challenges many of the manufacturing customers are dealing with. And then, of course, there is cybercrime and the espionage, and then on top of it, there is a security talent gap. One of the common thing I hear from the customer is that because manufacturing industry sometimes have traditional technologies, the new talent pool which is coming from the graduate school don't want to come and join them. The tech sector is much more interesting for them. So that kind of sometimes compounds some of these complexities. And then if you look at any data over the last few years, right, ransomware, hacktivism has been one of the topmost threats in the manufacturing industry. And all these threat environment, you can find it in the factory IT. You can have it in your, the software, firmware, and hardware products. Then it is also, in the integrity of the product, because when you are selling your product, you don't know where the vulnerabilities are coming from. And sometimes this is also a result of incompetence as well. Sometimes people make mistakes, and because of those mistakes, the threats can, magnify. So from Google's threat intelligence group, when we do multiple reports on the threats that are emerging in the market, specific by industries. And one of the statement I have put here is, the manufacturing sector is the most impacted one. And mainly because, the nature of manufacturing requires the industrial and network assets to connect it to the internet as they move to the cloud. And what that means is it exposes some of the digital assets to the internet, which means additional attack surface for some of the attackers. And this is data from some of the dedicated leak sites. Obviously, this data is changing, and also sometimes I'll admit that the source of this information you cannot rely on. But consistently, if you look at it, manufacturing industry is the most targeted industry. And it could be because it is because of the vulnerabilities, or it could be because there are more payments happening in the ransomware. So number of factors kind of contribute why manufacturing is top industry from a target perspective. I thought financial services would be the top one, but I was surprised. And this is consistent with, as probably many of you know, Google acquired Mandiant, and we do the incident response and threat breaches. Even in our work, we see this data consistently that manufacturing industry is one of the most targeted industry. And these are some of the data based on some of the analysis we have done from our own work and also from gathering data. We are tracking currently 4,000 plus total threat actors groups. And if you see on the left-hand side, there are close to 719 uncategorized groups, in which there are obviously 310 active groups, and there are 117 which are not being categorized because there's more information is needed. And then there are new and emerging groups. And then there is financial sector targeted groups, and then there are obviously advanced persistent threats on the right-hand side. What it shows that is that the threat landscape is real, and industries are being targeted for many reasons, as we saw in the previous slide, for maybe financial gain, disruption, especially in the manufacturing sector, as we see there is a dependency on the critical infrastructure. So with that threat landscape in mind, as customers move to the cloud, there are some of the challenges. And I want to kind of show you a study that we did in 2024 with the Information Security Media Group. We worked with more than 200 plus manufacturing companies, specifically with the senior cybersecurity leaders, and asked them a lot of survey questions. And this is kind of a high-level data. We will be publishing this data very soon, within a month. We will feel free to kind of go through our the website and download it. But the efficiency and cost savings are obviously the key drivers for manufacturing companies to move to cloud. One of the key things is security is one of the the biggest concern as well as an opportunity for all of these customers. If you look at some of the data, 59% of them said security is a key driver for them to move to cloud, because I have been saying it before as well, that for modern threats, you need modern technology. And as you are connecting all the legacy systems, you cannot defend against modern threats using the legacy system. So that's one of the opportunity or one of the advantages why many customers are moving to cloud. At the same time, 52% are saying that security is a challenge. When you move to cloud, OT has been traditionally on-premise. You have your SCADA systems and other industrial applications that there is concern of moving those applications to cloud. So it becomes a challenge on how do we move those industrial applications to cloud by being compliant and by meeting certain standards. 88% of them said they did not quantify the cyber risk and the risk reduction using cloud and AI, which is an interesting data point in itself. But the other interesting data point is among the survey respondents, 90% of the companies said a CISO or an equivalent leader was involved in the digital transformation. So, which means that as many of you are the leaders in the manufacturing space, striving for excellence in manufacturing, it's important that you have to kind of secure the digital doors as you move your operations, as you move your IP and other things to online to cloud, right? The Gen AI's impact on manufacturing digitization, 76% of them said they are still unsure and unclear. And one of the things, mainly because many of the customers that I work with, they are going through the proof of concept and piloting and looking at number of use cases. What are those use cases make sense for moving to AI and type of things. And at the very bottom, if you see, there are compliance priorities, and this is a global survey, obviously. So there is GDPR was one of the concern. Obviously, meeting certain security standards is one of them. From a biohealth manufacturing perspective, the GMP and other standards were really what was kind of driving or the concerns or the priorities raised during the survey. The top threat concerns were ransomware, data breach, and nation state. That's one of the reasons some of these customers are also moving to cloud, because they feel that cloud provides that resilience to these type of attacks. And 70% believe that as the industrial revolution is taking place, it is really going to help them to move to to go through that journey of industrial revolution and 4.0. So as we mentioned, I think the biggest challenge is the OT and IT. There is, if you kind of look at this opportunity, right, I think there are definitely benefits, right, that when you are connecting OT and IT, your business data is flowing through the IT technologies. And sometimes you can get these operational efficiencies, you get more insights and all of those things, but there are challenges as well, which is around how do you manage the complexity, which was traditionally separated. Obviously, cloud gives you the flexibility of industrial application, your enterprise application, or even through collaboration with the supply chain, it gives you a lot of flexibility to kind of bring all the the visibility and everything. But it also kind of raises some of these challenges from a security perspective. So kind of just to kind of summarize, right? Obviously, we have talked about the increased attack surface because modern manufacturing relies on interconnected systems. There is convergence of IT and OT is happening. There is no such thing, at least with the 99% of the customers that I interact with, they say there is no air-gapped OT. Obviously, there are some systems like SCADA systems which you are still relying and they need the physical infrastructure. And then migrating operations to the cloud actually creates the dependency and the reliance of the cloud provider. So you have to kind of choose the best cloud provider who is thinking about security because you want to keep your digital assets secure. And then cloud can also help from a compliance perspective because as a cloud provider, we have to meet regulations and standards around the globe, which means These controls are being tested, audited multiple times throughout the year in different geographies, different regions. So it can help sometimes from a regulatory compliance perspective, but there are certain compliances which can also create challenges because the compliance standards and the controls are written in a way that moving to a cloud system becomes a little bit challenging as well. And then obviously there are third party, the supply chain security, which is really important from a collaboration perspective, but at the same time, you have to kind of also be careful about the security challenges that you can get. So with this kind of the background, we looked at all the customers that we had over the last several years. And as executives, as you're kind of thinking about, when you are thinking about cloud and securing the transition, what are some of the strategies that are to keep in mind? This is nothing out of the extraordinary. It's more fundamental here, but I'll kind of walk you through some of the key points that kind of emerged through our case study. The first one is you have to align the cybersecurity strategies with the business goal. It is important to kind of say that, oh, we are doing security, but also say why you are doing security. What is the business consequence of not doing security well? So which means is that you have to communicate to the board some of these security risks in terms of the business goals. You also have to kind of culturally think about, right, security is a shared responsibility, especially within manufacturing. From the factory floor to the C-suite, everybody should own the responsibility for doing security, because some of the attacks that happen for manufacturing environment, it happened on the manufacturing floor because somebody put a vulnerable USB drive. So these things are still happening. So it's important to kind of create that awareness. We need to integrate cybersecurity into the risk management, right? It is still not prevalent in many organizations. Like just an example, for financial risk, CFO typically is responsible and he gets a seat on the board. But many times, even though cybersecurity is such a key business risk or a important element, cybersecurity at the CISOs many a times not communicating regularly to the board. So I think that probably needs to change as well. Compliance is boring, but at the same time, it can be a good start to kind of do security, right? And then you need to establish clear roles and responsibilities within your organization around who is doing what. One example I would say is that sometimes I have seen organizations, the CISO is only responsible for IT security. Anything non-IT related, he only gets involved when there is an incident. I think that needs to change, right? I think, but if organizations want to keep their OT separately, there has to be some sort of governance and communication that need to happen. The second one is around a governance framework that includes governance, risk, and compliance. This is important because you need to engage with the board, and you have to ensure that the board is aware that risk management includes cloud and AI. There is very fast adoption of AI in many of the companies, but sometimes you don't think about security. So, and I have seen organizations where there is no such thing as AI governance. Different business units within organizations are doing different things. I think just like shadow IT, now there is a concept of shadow AI because there is no governance framework around which tool you should use. Obviously, in the new generation of employees come through, they want to use all these tools. So it is important kind of to think about having that risk management framework. And obviously you have to empower your teams and build your skills. So one of the technique this is a kind of an eye chart is the risk management framework can include the kind of three things. One is identify your all assets. And these are not the digital assets, right? These could be digital, OT, and other assets. I'll give an example, quality control application using AI. In this scenario, the model that you're using for that particular AI, the data you are using from or training for that model, plus the integration with the production system that is needed for quality control, they all becomes your assets. So you have to kind of identify your assets and across all environments. Then you have to do your regular assessments of the security around all these assets. What are some of the vulnerabilities? What are some of the TTPs, the prevailing TTPs, which is the tactics, techniques, and procedures are being used for getting access to these assets? What are some of the attack paths and things like that? You have to kind of do the assessments. And then third, you have to kind of monitor continuously for any vulnerabilities. Like in the example of AI model, I think one thing you can think about is there a output that is not as expected? That means something is something has gone wrong or something is probably wrong. So you have to kind of think about this kind of framework as you think about cloud, right? Identify all your assets, assess all the risks, and then monitor continuously for any vulnerabilities as well. As companies navigate through complex cloud adoption, there are transformation opportunities. Many a times, companies focus on only one type of opportunities for transformation. Okay, let me move my SAP application to cloud or IT applications. So this is a framework kind of to think about. Like what are the type of applications or workloads you can move to cloud, and kind of introduce the concept of security by design, by default in deployment that cloud providers, especially Google, kind of pushes as you think about your workloads in the cloud. Obviously, you have your enterprise information technology, which is kind of safeguarding your digital assets and infrastructure and networks. And then this is where most of the times I've seen the transformation happens, but true transformation has to touch on all the other three areas. Your industrial and operational technology. How do you protect your industrial operation from cyber threats? And how do you move those applications to the cloud? Products and engineering technology. Many companies have engineering technologies to design and develop the products. And then after the products are shipped, if they are smart product, there is a end consumer. Manufacturers want to keep the connectivity with the end customer to gain insights, provide services, and other things. So how do you build security into the products throughout the life cycle? That becomes an opportunity as well for transformation. And obviously, the supply chain and the logistics. Pretty much every company has to source parts or software relying on third parties, and then obviously you rely on logistic companies to do the shipping and transportation. So how do you make sure that you are not dealing with 300 applications, or you are not dealing with 300 plus questionnaire-based spreadsheet or something like that, which ultimately becomes a paper exercise, whereas opportunity within the cloud is using secure collaboration means depending on the use cases. If you're collaborating using an application, how can you make sure that that application, you are connecting through an API to your application and sharing openly, hey, I'm doing this because I'm worried about data protection, and here are all the capabilities that I'm building. Because as you kind of think about cloud, you also think about where you can leverage cloud native capabilities in your journey. And then build a roadmap. Many times I've seen that the roadmap doesn't exist. It is sometimes it is like, oh, I want to move this application to cloud. And many a times these applications are not built keeping cloud native capabilities in mind. You have to kind of leverage cloud native capabilities and not just lift and shift your application to cloud. Then otherwise you won't be getting a lot of advantage or the resilience that cloud can offer. So simply put, think about what are your products that needs connection back to your environment? Are they secure, right? Ask questions around, is there a secure integration with your OT environment to cloud? What are some of the industrial applications that you are considering to move to cloud? Your EMS, HMI, or even SCADA systems. Can it be moved to cloud? I hear all the time that, oh, I can't move this system because it introduces latency. But in reality, when you test it out, the latency is so less, and it doesn't impact many a times. And many customers have told me, wow, this has actually helped me to not only efficiency perspective, but from a security perspective. So unless you are thinking about something, think about all the different use cases. As you are thinking about secure modern factories, I totally understand that factories cannot be built overnight. Sometimes once you have a factory, they don't change for 10, 20 years. But as you are thinking about newer opportunities, think about what that means. How do you architecture for a modern factory? And then supply chain. Is my supply chain secure, and is it transparent to me? Who are the vendors? If something goes wrong, what are the things can go wrong from a disruption perspective? And I used an example of connected vehicle because I also work with a lot of automotive customers. They want to provide these capabilities around a vehicle which is out. How do you make sure that you are talking to the vehicle, monitoring from a safety and cyber threats perspective? There are processes companies are developing from a digital twin capability so that they can design their next thing better. So you have to kind of think about all those questions and build a roadmap around automation where you can think about AI. How do you secure your SCADA systems? Can you think about zero trust principles in the applications that you are thinking about? And also the key thing is, this is an interesting point for me, think about intrinsic security hardening and adversarial, attack path simulation. Many times, customers don't think about it. There's no threat modeling done in many cases. So think about all these things and build a nice roadmap as you kind of through this transformation. And transformation is not overnight. It's a journey. It can take years. But having a roadmap and a vision, I think, is a critical piece. So this is, I talked about production and products lifecycle. Since 2019, we see a lot of manufacturing companies try to leverage cloud from a product perspective. One of the terms I like to use is design to engineer, engineer to manufacturing, and manufacturing to the after the market, right? The benefits of having the best and the brilliant talent around the world working on your design and development of the product and making sure that some of these products are also built or developed keeping cloud native capabilities. So this is another benefit that if you are thinking about that transformation, include this in your strategy. Cloud brings in a lot of opportunities in terms of the infrastructure, the compliance, and the data protection. So you can leverage the initial hiccups and the challenges that existed before have surpassed in the last several years as I see many customers moving to use a cloud for your CAD systems and other capabilities. So there are opportunities that you can leverage. I think I touched upon this, securing the supply chain. One thing I want to say it is, communicate with your supplier. Having that open and transparent communication is really key as you kind of think about how you secure your supply chain. These days, any conversation doesn't happen without talking about AI. So this is a use case many customers are using. How can you use AI in your cybersecurity journey as your digital and a security assistant? It can stop threats because it can auto-generate a lot of the security control policies and configs. Systems can secure themselves because you can automate a lot of the tasks that otherwise you will depend on humans. And the biggest benefit is, you can actually democratize your security expertise. IT people are becoming more cybersecurity because now they can ask natural language questions to the system, and they can leverage their knowledge from the AI machines. The next one is stay ahead of what's coming. This is one thing I commonly hear. Oh, and I'm not worried about quantum threat because it's way out there. What some of the threat actors are doing is now they are collecting a lot of the encrypted data because they want to probably, anticipating that when the quantum or cryptographically relevant quantum computers are available, then they can decrypt the information. Many industries probably, it doesn't apply because, some of the data might not be relevant after 1, 2, 3 months, right? But in many industries, the encrypted data could be relevant in 2, 3, 4 years. So you have to kind of think about how do you secure them. The reason I put this here is at Google, we are implementing the PQC safe, the quantum safe cryptography following the NIST standards. And you can find a lot of information on our PQC hub as well. And the last one is, upskill your workforce. If you look at the colored epics here, right? And then look at those headlines. Learn from your, you have to kind of improve. When you think about upskilling, external experience, how can you learn from other experiences and upskill your employees? Then you lead, right? Lead your workforce through sponsorship and teamwork. This doesn't happen many a times. So this would be another strategy for executives. Like, I don't only upskill, but I also lead, and with the tone from the top. And how do you scale, right? Scale using an architecture which is scalable, where you can leverage infrastructure as a code, use CI/CD pipeline and other techniques that think about those kind of emerging tech to kind of scale. And then secure with the right identity access management, and the right controls. And then the surrounding thing is around, these are the table stakes. You need to have focus on this. So just to conclude, digital transformation is a journey, and thanks for giving me the time to kind of talk through some of the things that I have seen engaging customers. And I know we have like 2 minutes and probably take maybe one question if there is one. Okay, thank you.